Okay, so you want to own a football stadium. Picture it, your name on the building, 80,000 people screaming under lights you paid for, a private box where you shake hands with players after the game, champagne on ice, your logo on the Jumbotron. This is what the movies sell you. The owner as king, the stadium as throne, Sunday afternoons as your personal coronation. Here's what the listing doesn't show you. A single NFL-caliber stadium roof replacement can run $300 million on its own. Property tax bills on stadiums in some cities exceed $10 million a year before a single hot dog is sold. Turf replacement, HVAC failures, and security system upgrades routinely blow past $40 million in a single offseason. And in most cities, you didn't even pay for the whole thing. Taxpayers covered somewhere between 30% and 70% of construction, and you still get to call it yours. Stadium ownership is one of the most misunderstood business models in America. On the outside, it looks like a trophy. On the inside, it looks like a 65,000-seat concrete liability with a mortgage the size of a small country's GDP. By the end of this, you'll understand exactly how stadium economics actually work and why the smartest owners in sports don't make their money the way you think they do. The umbrella term nobody explains. Stadium ownership is actually an umbrella term covering several very different business models that get lumped together because they all involve a big building and a scoreboard. There's a publicly financed, privately operated stadium, the most common model in major U.S. pro sports, where taxpayers fund construction and a franchise owner runs operations. There's a fully privatized stadium, rare and expensive, like SoFi Stadium, where the owner eats the entire construction cost. There's a college and university stadium, funded through donor endowments and athletic department revenue. There's a multi-purpose civic stadium, owned by a city or county, and leased out to multiple tenants. There's a minor league or independent league stadium, a much smaller, much leakier version of the same idea. And there's the naming rights anchored stadium, where a corporation effectively co-owns the economics without ever touching a football. These share a scoreboard and a parking lot. Financially, they have almost nothing in common. This script focuses on the publicly financed, privately operated model because it's the most common structure in American pro football, the most politically controversial, and by far the most misunderstood in terms of who actually profits. The big number that gets bigger. The primary cost driver in stadium economics isn't the land. It's a construction contract, and has been inflating faster than almost any other asset class in professional sports. A modest college or minor league stadium renovation in a mid-tier market like Wichita or Chattanooga might run $120 million to $180 million. A new NFL-caliber stadium in a major metro, think Nashville, Buffalo, or Las Vegas, runs $1.4 billion to $2.3 billion. Las Vegas's Allegiant Stadium came in around $1.9 billion. SoFi Stadium in Inglewood landed closer to $5 billion once you count the surrounding entertainment district. The cheap market number is deceptive. A stadium built for $180 million in a smaller market usually means a smaller seating bowl, fewer premium suites, weaker sightlines, and, critically, a smaller local media market to sell those suites into. You saved on concrete and steel, but you gutted the one revenue stream, premium seating and sponsorship, that actually makes a stadium profitable. Cheap land and cheap construction almost always mean weaker long-term cash flow. Let's do the math on a realistic mid-major NFL tier stadium. Land acquisition and site prep around $150 million. Base structure and steel around $900 million. Premium seating build-out around $220 million. Technology and video board systems around $110 million. And surrounding infrastructure, roads, parking structures, utility upgrades, another $180 million. That's $1.56 billion before you hired a single usher. Here's the axiom that matters more than any number on that spreadsheet. The price of the stadium and the profitability of the stadium are two completely different numbers. The infrastructure trap, the purchase or construction price, is just the entry fee. What the listing or the groundbreaking press release never shows you is everything required to actually operate the building. Game day staffing infrastructure, including security checkpoints, medical stations, and crowd control systems, runs $8 million to $22 million to build out before the first event. Broadcast and technology infrastructure, fiber lines, control rooms, camera rigging positions, connectivity for national broadcasts, adds another $40 million to $90 million. Compliance and safety systems, including fire suppression, structural monitoring, and ADA-mandated accessibility retrofits, run $15 million to $35 million. Concessions and hospitality build-out, covering commercial kitchens, point-of-sale systems, and vendor licensing, costs $25 million to $60 million. And parking and transit infrastructure, structured parking shuttle systems, traffic management contracts with the city, adds $50 million to $140 million, depending on how badly the surrounding roads were designed in the first place. Added up, $138 million to $347 million before the stadium is even operational, on top of the base construction number. This is the gap that kills undercapitalized ownership groups. They budget for the building. They don't budget for the building to actually function on a Sunday with 65,000 people trying to buy beer and leave the parking lot at the same time. The operating costs, daily bleed. Here's the structural problem nobody puts in the pitch deck. Revenue arrives occasionally. Expenses arrive daily. An NFL team plays roughly 8 to 10 home games a year. That's 8 to 10 days where the building generates real revenue. The other 355 days, the stadium still needs full-time staff, still needs a field maintained, still needs insurance paid, and still needs the lights on for maintenance crews and occasional concert or trade show trying to fill the calendar gap. Full-time operational staff, grounds crew, facilities engineers, administrative staff, costs $18 million to $30 million a year for a major stadium. Field and turf maintenance alone, including resodding and irrigation systems, runs $2 million to $6 million annually. Insurance, covering liability, weather damage, and event cancellation, runs $12 million to $25 million a year for large venues, a figure that has climbed sharply as extreme weather events have become more frequent. Utilities and climate control for a building that size run $8 million to $14 million annually, even accounting for retractable roofs designed to cut cooling costs. According to the National Stadium Operators Association's most recent facilities report, non-game day operating costs now account for over 60% of stadiums' total annual expenditure, a figure that has risen steadily as venues add year-round hospitality and event programming to offset the empty calendar problem. Source, 2024. The revenue model, the part that has to work. The core transaction is simple. Sell tickets, sell suites, sell sponsorships, sell concessions, and rent the building out on the days the team isn't using it. Take a realistic season. 65,000 seats average sold across 9 home games, an average ticket price of $145, generating roughly $84.8 million. Add premium suite revenue of $38 million, sponsorship and naming rights of $32 million, and concessions and merchandise of $26 million. Total gross revenue, $180.8 million. Now subtract total annual operating costs of $68 million, debt service on construction financing of $95 million, and infrastructure maintenance reserves of $14 million. That leaves net operating profit of roughly $3.8 million, against an asset that costs over $1.5 billion to build. That's a return of roughly 0.2% to 0.5% on total capital invested in a given year, before accounting for appreciation. A savings account at a credit union pays more. The volatility factor. The single biggest external risk to a stadium's economics isn't weather or crime. It's on-field performance. A losing season doesn't just hurt pride. It collapses premium seating renewals, sponsorship activation clauses, and secondary market ticket pricing all at once. A stadium that generated $38 million in suite revenue during a playoff run can see that number fall to $21 million the following year after a losing season, as luxury clients decline renewal options tied performance clauses. That's a $17 million swing from a single disappointing year on the field, before a single brick has changed. There's a familiar story in stadium circles about a well-capitalized ownership group that bought into a mid-market franchise, assuming steady 8-win seasons would sustain sweet renewals indefinitely. 2 rebuilding years later, sponsorship renewal rates had fallen by nearly a third, and the group was forced to refinance construction debt at a significantly higher rate than originally projected, turning a modest annual profit into a real loss almost overnight. As Daniel Ashworth, a sports facilities economist frequently cited in venue financing circles, put it, people think they're buying a building. What they're actually buying is a bet on a win percentage they don't control. The twist, why the rich still buy these? If stadium ownership is as financially marginal, why do some of the wealthiest people in America keep buying professional sports franchises and the buildings that come with them? Owners like Stan Kroenke, Jerry Jones, and Josh Harris didn't get to their net worth through ticket sales. The stadium isn't the business. The stadium is the vehicle. The real reasons: depreciation schedules that let owners write off enormous portions of the franchise and facility value against other income. Favorable public financing that shifts risk onto taxpayers while the owner keeps upside and appreciation. And the fact that franchise values themselves have appreciated at a pace that dwarfs the operating profit. Some franchises have quintupled in value over 15 years regardless of whether the stadium ever turned an annual profit. One mechanism worth understanding in detail: bonus depreciation on stadium-adjacent assets. An owner who structures a facility purchase correctly can depreciate a significant share of qualifying non-structural assets, scoreboards, seating systems, technology infrastructure, on an accelerated schedule. On a stadium with $400 million in qualifying depreciable assets, that can translate into $150 million to $200 million in deductions against other income over several years, sheltering income far beyond what the stadium itself generates. The operating business is not the business. The tax status is the business. 2 scenarios: the good year and the bad year. The good year: the team wins 10 games, makes a playoff run. Sweet renewals hit 96%. Sponsorship activation bonuses kick in, and the franchise's estimated market value rises by $180 million on top of modest $4 million operating profit. On paper, that's a fantastic year, driven almost entirely by appreciation, not operations. The bad year: the same stadium. One significant weather event forces a cancellation of a marquee non-football event booked to offset the calendar gap. The team finishes 4-13. Suite renewals fall to 71%, and a scheduled roof maintenance issue costs an unbudgeted $22 million. The result is an operating loss of roughly $9 million, and franchise value growth stalls or slightly contracts of the year. The gap between those 2 scenarios is close to $210 million in a single 12-month period, on the exact same building, with the exact same fixed costs. The difference between owners who build wealth here and owners who go broke is not intelligence. It is cash reserves, diversified revenue, and the ability to survive the bad year. So, you wanted to own a football stadium. The lights, the roar, the box, the coin toss, your name on the building. Yes, it can make you enormously wealthy, but probably not in the way you imagined. Not through ticket sales, not through hot dogs and parking, and not on the timeline you had in mind. It happens through appreciation, tax structuring, and years of surviving thin operating margins long enough for the asset itself to compound in value. The romance of stadium ownership is real. The economics of stadium ownership are complicated. The people who thrive here are the ones who hold both of those truths at the same time and plan accordingly.